Welcome to the Ledger and the Leader here at BBH CSD. I'm Superintendent Jeff Harrison.
And I'm Treasurer Craig Yaniglos. This is where transparency meets teamwork.
We're giving you a front row seat to the decisions, dollars, and directions that help shape your school district.
No fluff, just real conversations straight from your district leadership.
All right, Craig, so episode number 2, we made it through the first one, okay? Much harassment at home?
Well, that's an interesting question because I don't know if it would be at home. I think it was actually from some of my colleagues. How about for you? Did you get any feedback from your colleagues?
Well, I got 2 thumbs up from Mrs. Harrison. So once I got her affirmation that I didn't embarrass myself, I thought, okay, this isn't too bad. So I guess we'll do episode 2.
Okay. Well, I shared it with some of my colleagues, and I think they were mortified. Actually, I think that they're nervous that they may have to do this.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see how that goes. But some of them actually were like, they can't picture themselves having this kind of conversation with their superintendent.
Not
this
everyone,
raw, unfiltered conversation.
Not everyone has a relationship like the two of us. Let's just face it, okay?
That's true.
We're going to set the bar kind of high, and just see if we can continue to do it. However, in recapping, being the former coach, going back and looking at the video, we said that this podcast was about no fluff. Well,
True,
I think it was about
that.
85% fluff on the first episode. So I guess we're going to have to get down to business a little bit.
I think so.
Okay. So maybe today we take on the easy topic or short topic, tongue-in-cheek there, about school finance and how schools are funded. I mean, we talk about it till we are blue in the face, I feel like. But it's still, we are approached with questions day in and day out that we just seem to always repeat. So maybe we can somehow in this episode kind of boil it down a little bit to the important facts about how schools are financed, why schools need levies, and why we're in the situation we're in with House Bill 96. You think that's a good topic?
I think we could try our best in one episode. This could be about 30 episodes if we really wanted it to be.
Yeah, and it's going to be a heavy lift on your part because I'm just going to be the color commentary here. But, how about we just kind of start out a little bit with what House Bill 96 is? People are hearing this, they're hearing HB 96 and veto or veto override. So what is House Bill 96? Let's start there.
Yeah, so every General Assembly will create its budget bill. So in Ohio, our schools the budget for Ohio is actually done on a biennium basis. So they set the budget for the next 2 years, and depending on what number that is what it was referred to. So the House usually sets that, so it was House Bill 96 this time around. I think the last biennium it was House Bill 133. So you got to be careful when you just say House Bill 96 because there probably was a House Bill 96 with the last General Assembly. So this is the budget bill for the whole state, so it's not just our local entities that are involved in this. It's really just how the state operates in itself. But of course, a large portion of that, billions of dollars, are for public education.
Absolutely, but that's not where we get all of our money from, especially in Brecksville-Broadview Heights. And I think that's what people need to understand a little deeper too. Is we really get our funds to operate in our school district in maybe 3 different locations. I would say from our local community, from the state, and from the federal. Would that be correct here in Brecksville-Broadview Heights?
That would be true. And if you've listened to our exhilarating board meetings that we have, along with our 5-year forecast presentation, soon to be the 3-year forecast, we talk about that in detail.
Right. So you say was 5-year forecast, now 3-year forecast. That's one of the changes in House Bill 96, isn't it?
It is. So some of us are still shaking our heads a little bit because, we want some of that long-range planning. It is the recommended format, but the state legislature in House Bill 96 has moved that from a 5-year outlook to or a current plus 4 years to like a current plus 3.
Why would they do something like that, do you think?
To be honest, I think a lot of us we just don't know. And in talking with our professional communities and our colleagues, everyone's kind of maintaining the 5 years because that's the more responsible thing to do. But at the same time, we're only submitting to the state what they are asking for.
So why do they require that forecast, and what information do you provide for them? What's the story being told with that forecast for the common community member?
Right. So, I mean, when you're looking at forecasting your expenditures out, and in many cases, in year 4 and year 5, you're going to see some deficit spends. You just don't know what's going to be there. Treasurers try to not overestimate revenues and not underestimate expenditures because that's what gets you into trouble. But the state also uses, a bunch of entities use that data. The Auditor of State's office uses that data. DEW uses that data, which is the Department of Education and Workforce, to monitor schools' financial health. And by taking away more of that long road picture, I think some of us are kind of shaking our heads as to what that might entail for schools that have traditionally gone. You can go very quickly in some of these districts from being healthy to being like in a fiscal emergency status. And I think that making the runway even shorter to look at that could make it more difficult.
I know in your world, in the world of finance, that 5-year forecast is probably used for a multitude of things. But for me, on the superintendent side, that's a tool we use during negotiations. Not in a positive or negative way, but it gives us a forecast so that when we're negotiating with our unions, we have an idea what our financial outlook is and is all about. So what are some ways that you use the 5-year forecast outside of negotiations?
I don't know if we use it that much outside of that. Is such a big part of what we do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're always looking at that. Our two biggest expenditure items, as you know, are salaries and benefits. So that is so tightly woven into the 5-year forecast. And what we can do with our teacher contracts and negotiations purposes. And then we look at purchase services, which a lot of people can monitor those on trend. I think, unfortunately, with the state of school funding, I think it's hard for schools to look at new initiatives and whatnot, whether it's in purchasing new materials or different services, because of the constraints that we have in terms of just maintaining the status quo while trying to invest our resources in our primary resource, which is, human capital. It's teachers, it's counselors, it's administrators, it's all across the board. That's where we focus all of our efforts on. But what people may not know is that, when you are negotiating a contract, the treasurer is the one who's on the hook for making sure that those funds can be certified. So when you look at a 3-year contract, you have to certify and say that in those 3 years, those funds are available. And if you can't, it makes it very difficult. Those are hard conversations to have with union leadership and the Board of Education, of course, as well as the community, because the only way to get out of that mess is going to be to put a levy on, probably.
Correct. And even if it's a 3-year forecast or a 5-year forecast, you just told us that the state budget's set on the biennium.
Correct.
So in the course of a 5-year forecast, you could be across 2 different bienniums.
Technically
maybe
3.
even 3, right?
Yeah.
See, I was a social studies teacher, not math. So, and that's where superintendents talk in ballpark figures, which I know treasurers don't like it when we do that, do you?
It's true. We do not.
Okay. So talking about the state budget, that's what we're on, House Bill 96.
Yep.
So what does Brecksville Broadview Heights get from the state to educate children?
So it primarily comes, I look at it as, it comes in 2 buckets. So in the presentation we just gave last week at our board meeting, we talked about we're 70-some% locally funded. So those are local taxpayers, commercial and local residential taxpayers that are funding our local schools. Then we have about 17%, which is funded by the state. But I look at that differently. It's in 2 separate buckets. Some of that is located in what's the property tax allocation or the homestead and rollback reimbursement. And then the other part of that is in the actual, what they call the school foundation, which, if you've heard the term fair school funding formula, that is that pot of money. So those come on the forecast in 2 separate lines. So you have under your real estate taxes and your personal utility property tax revenue, you have your foundation, which is unrestricted and restricted.
Okay.
And then you have your property tax allocation, which those are still big buckets, but for us it's a much smaller portion, because there are some schools that are funded at 60, 70, 80% that are state funded. We are the absolute opposite of that, because they say that Brecksville Broadview Heights is a wealthy area and that our taxpayers can afford to fund our public schools at a higher level than other areas of other communities, I guess I should say.
And that level right now is roughly 70%, you're saying, the local contribution towards funding education in Brecksville Broadview Heights.
Yep.
And 17% is coming from the state, and the 2 kind of buckets that you referred to, but then you used some words pretty quickly that got a whole, let's back up here.
Back up.
You said something about homestead and rollback. So I know what property taxes are. I own property. I pay property taxes. But what is homestead and rollback when you talk about that?
So for years, the state has offered this reimbursement. And so it's been really like 12.5% between these 2 buckets is what it comes out to be. So it reduces that amount of your property tax when those levies are passed. So the levy's going to generate, X dollars. Well, they're going to just take a portion of that, and the taxpayer will pay most of it. But that, 12.5%, the state's going to just pay the school and make them whole.
Okay.
Unfortunately, in 2013, which a lot of people don't talk about, but in 2013, the Ohio legislature passed a law that said, we're not going to do that anymore. They made some different choices in taxes. They wanted to lower taxes. When they did that, what happened was that any levy passed after August of 2013 was no longer applicable for those reimbursements.
So I'm not getting a discount anymore.
Correct. So in Brecksville-Broadview Heights, that levy that was passed in 2017 does not qualify. So the full burden of that property tax was borne by the local property tax owners. Whereas prior to that, in our other levies that had passed in our history, and that still remains, those are still a part of it, but any levy moving forward after 2013 does not qualify. So the state is not making the school whole in that regard. Who's making them whole is that full bill is going to the property tax owner.
So I guess in summary right there, we saw a shift in the burden of those taxes from the property owner and state to just the property owner.
Correct.
So how are those determined? Like, I own a home in Brecksville-Broadview Heights. I don't. I live in Medina, as we talked about, but hypothetically in our school district, and I pay property tax. So what portion, or how does that get to the schools? What's that look like for the common community member?
So in most cases, I mean, depending on the community, you're looking at anywhere from 50 to probably 65% of your property taxes are funding your schools. And in some cases, it's regardless of what your state share index is. It's just how those communities can fund it. It's still a large percentage in most communities that is coming through on those local property tax bills that are going towards your public schools. But it's also libraries, it's fire, it's roads, it's EMS and police services. That usually makes up the bulk of the rest of it.
So those levies that a community passes here in Brecksville-Broadview Heights, correct me if I'm wrong, they're all continuous, meaning we don't have to go back to the ballot to renew a levy.
That
like
is
many
correct.
communities and other districts I had worked in prior, we would be on a renewal cycle, and every 3, 5, however many years, we'd have to go back and ask to continue to get that money. Ours are continuous. They were voted in, they're continuous. But when they're voted in, they're for a certain millage. You hear a lot, right? They're a certain millage that equates to a dollar amount. Does that dollar amount grow over time? Does that millage change over time? And when I vote in a levy as a member of our community, what should I expect over the course of those years?
So that's a pretty loaded question. As you said, we have all current expense or continuous operating levies that are here currently. Those were converted many years ago because this community also, it's my understanding, because it was before my time, had a lot of those emergency levies that were in place. And there's this voter fatigue that happens because you're constantly going to the ballot. And these are tools that were given, at the time. And unfortunately, they come off with this term of emergency levy, which can be difficult to decipher because it doesn't mean that the school district is in an emergency. It just means that it's actually just a fixed sum levy saying I need $5 million, and then they correlate that to the proper millage.
So why do they call it emergency then? Why don't they just call it a fixed sum levy?
I don't know. We could ask the legislature, but I don't know.
And I guess maybe I want to put that disclaimer out there too, because I don't want to come across as that we think that the legislators' jobs are easy or they're intentionally doing things to schools. They got a tough job too. I mean, let's face it. They have a tough job too. There's a lot of people who have an interest in what goes on in the state and where the state spends its money. Obviously, we're a little biased at public education. So they call it an emergency levy. It's not because we screwed up or did something wrong as a school district. It's the technical name is fixed sum levy.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're constantly asking to go back, but those levies are fixed sums, so they only bring in X amount of dollars, and you have to eventually come back and renew those. You can do 5 years, you could do 10 years in some cases. Some people even do it with permanent improvement levies. In my last district, we were looking at one of those to say proof of concept. Like if you let us prove to the community 5 years of PI or PI permanent improvement money through a levy, and then if we do a good job, then you can renew it again. It's not a continuous. Again, ours are all continuous here, which is nice because then you don't have to go through that voter fatigue. To your other point about whether that money generates more money or not, it does not, with the exception that we've talked about at some board meetings with inside millage. So when a continuing levy is passed, it's passed for, I think our last one was 5.9 mils, I believe. And so when that was passed, it generated X number of dollars. Well, as valuations go up,
Which they have.
the effective millage goes down.
Okay.
So let's just say right now that effective millage from 2017 is 4.9. That's probably not right. But for illustration purposes, that gets drilled down a little bit so that you don't actually you're not collecting at the full rate, because if you collect at the 5.9, you will bring in more money.
Right.
This all ties back into House Bill 920, which basically tries to protect property tax owners, that their rates or their local funding will not increase with valuations of properties until they hit the 20 mil floor.
Oh boy, here we go, right? Here we go. So you're saying, so we pass a continuous levy. It's 4.9 mils, whatever, raises a certain dollar amount, but the community will never pay more than that total dollar amount on that continuous levy.
Correct.
Is that correct? So then when a school district needs more funds because of inflation, because of costs, because of whatever, as years go by, sometimes upwards of 10 years, that's why there's a need for an additional levy, right? Because the levies of the past only bring in a certain dollar amount. It's like having a job that you never get a raise in, right?
Yes.
And you get paid the same amount every year for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. As somebody who has a job, if you're paid the same amount, my costs at home are going up. The cost of gas, the cost of whatever is going up. So I have to either work harder, get a new job, or something of that nature. As a school district, the only thing we have and the only mechanism we have is to put another levy on the ballot. And so that's how we increase our local revenue.
That is correct.
So then you throw out here another House bill. So we've talked about House Bill 96. You talked about House Bill something else earlier. Now you're talking about House Bill 920, was it?
Yeah, House Bill 920 is
What's
an
that one?
oldie but goldie. This was passed in the 1970s. And that is the part that protects that valuation of property. So as the property increases, the rates are basically working inversely to come down, and so that it only collects the right amount of money. That was originally passed so that property tax owners would not be subject to that. And that, to your point, what then has to happen is because that income, that funding mechanism does not increase, you eventually have to ask for another levy. So that's why we have continuous levies dating back to the 1970s in this district as well as districts throughout the state. So what it also does is when it gets to the 20 mil floor, so to put things in perspective, before this latest reevaluation, Brecksville-Broadview Heights was sitting at an effective millage rate of about 33.4. So that's not to the 20 mil floor yet. Then we have the property tax, the sexennial update, which happened last year, and now we're sitting at 27 mils. So you see we got a lot closer to the 20 mil floor. And right now there's approximately 500 school districts out of 600 that are sitting at the 20 mil floor because of the historic property tax appraisals that have gone, upwards. So we're sitting there and we're getting closer to the 20 mil floor. But what we've not seen are these historic increases where some school districts got caught off guard. So the school district did, the superintendent, the treasurer, the board, and the community. So let's say they were sitting at 24 mils. And then they got a 30% increase, and all of a sudden they're sitting at 18. Well, House Bill 920 basically says, nope, we can't collect 18, we're going to collect 20. So in that case, the taxpayers saw an increase. And so
unvoted increase.
An unvoted increase. Although that's a rough word, right?
Is that superintendent speak?
Because it was voted, right?
Yes, initially
so it was voted, but that increase, it's just a consequence really of the voted piece. So I'm trying to be,
So I'm going to try to boil it down so that the common layperson like myself can fully understand this. You're talking about millage. You're talking about 20 mil floor. And we talked earlier about when levies are passed, therefore a certain millage. But that millage will decrease over time as your valuation goes up in your community. And it does that. The millage goes down, so we don't collect more money than we said we were going to collect on those levies, right?
Correct. Yep.
So when you said Brecksville-Broadview Heights went from 33.4 mils down to 27 mils, that's because the value of the homes in our community continued to rise, and they had to take that millage down, so we didn't collect more money than we told the voters we would collect when we passed those levies of yesteryear. Correct?
You got it.
And then the 20 mil floor is so that we don't drop below it because that millage can continue to go and go and go and go. So why did they put the 20 mil floor in, and why is it there? Or what's the benefit, I guess? Maybe explain the benefit of the 20 mil floor.
Well, so the benefit is that once you hit the 20 mil floor, that you will start to see an increase. So in some communities, this could be an extra $1 million. It could be extra $2 million, depending on how far below the floor they go. So in some cases, it could be like a little bit of a windfall. It's also another use of why people do the emergency levies is if they're below the floor, the only way to then get above the floor, let's say if you're at 18, you've got to then do at least 2 mils just to get you back to the floor. So what some schools have done is they've gone on the floor, they've been on the floor for years, they start turning to emergency levies, which is not calculated in the 20 mil floor until House Bill 96. Which said that it would be. And then we go down the route of governor vetoes and different types of levies.
It's still up in the air.
Some of that's still up in the air. We have well, the legislature has till December of 2026 to decide whether they want to veto
Which
it.
is unbelievable, right? I mean, you know, I guess until we got into the situation, I didn't realize that they could go all the way to December of 2026, not this December of 2025. 26. In a 2-year biennium, they can go all the way to December of 26 to decide to veto something.
That is correct.
So again, even now today, you know, the governor line item vetoed some items. The House came back and they overrode one of the vetoes, but we need the Senate to also override it for it to go back, and the Senate hasn't met yet on it. So we're in this limbo. So I guess maybe let's go there. Let's talk about, so the governor, the HB 96 comes out, the governor line vetoes many items, but 4, I believe, that really are in our world. And then the House has overridden one of those. So they overrode the ability to do what? What was that again? You said?
So they want those levies to count and the types of levies that you can use at your disposal. So they were getting rid of the option for schools to use emergency levies. They were getting rid of the option for them to use substitute levies. And so now the governor has said, like, that's maybe not in the best interest right now. We can work on other ideas. So the House has overrode that provision, and now it's waiting for the Senate, which we still don't know because they're trying to figure that out when that's going to happen. They said they're going to vote on it, whether it's a yes or no, I guess. But you know, we'll see. But I think more importantly, too, of what you just talked about was we're like living in limbo for like, what, a year and a half?
Yeah.
Which is like, how do schools plan for some of these things? Because there's other provisions that could be affected down the road as well. And you just don't know because the rules could just keep changing, you know, on a dime in case they decide they want to make changes to things.
So I'm going to take a little detour here a little bit because you talked about planning. And a big part of what we do as administrative team, treasurer, superintendent, board of education, our admin team, is we try to plan for the resources we have. And we do that not only with our local funds, our state funds, and our federal funds. And that's where I want to go next is the federal funds. Because in the news, President Trump had held back some of the funding that we got from the federal government. So maybe, Craig, share with us, what's the federal picture look like for Brecksville Broadview Heights? What kind of funding do we get from the federal government, both in how it comes to us and maybe how much? And then we could talk about the planning that we do with it.
Yeah, so there's always this, so the federal government typically releases, you know, these allocations to the state governments. The state governments administer those grants. So the ones that we typically use and see every year is our Title I, which is typically for economically disadvantaged students. It really tries to provide resources for students in reading and math in particular. The second one is Title II, which is usually for professional development. There's a couple of other uses. Sometimes you can use it for reducing class sizes. That's not as large of a portion. Title III focuses on EL students, English learners. Title IV has a little bit more of a broad variety of things you can do with that as well, smaller amounts. And then our biggest chunk actually we currently have is IDEA, which is for special education. So in the years that I've been here, which is now going on 6, this is another part about not getting a raise. I would argue that our bucket, and in total, all of those grants are about $1.2 million.
Okay.
Now again, from the federal government. Yep. Now that's out of a $56, $57 million budget. Okay, so it's not a large amount of money, even though to the common person that's a large amount of money. I'd like that in my checkbook at the moment, but it's $1.2 million. That dollar amount has not changed, with the exception of if we talk about, you know, ESSER, that was those were one-time funds that came out during the COVID pandemic. But our Title I funding has been the same. Our Title II funding has been the same. Our Title III, all while costs have been increasing. Then we have this executive order or that we're gonna hold back the funds. Now they've given them because Congress appropriated them legally for 25. And then last week we were at a professional development workshop, and the new budget proposal says that the current administration does not want to fund Title II, Title III, or Title IV for the 26 budget. So that'll be up to Congress, of course, at the end, or it should be. So we'll figure out what happens next, but that is the current proposal, is that funding would go away, which for us is about, those 3 different grants that we get is about $100,000. So $70-some thousand of that is used annually for us to help teachers do professional development. Sometimes it's to pay for substitutes while they're getting that professional development. Sometimes they're going to, you know, science of reading is very big, so we're doing a lot of professional development in that world. Title III, we have had a huge influx of Title III students that are needing services that have come here from the war in Ukraine. We have a larger population than usual, I think, right now for that group of people. It's $20,000. Could we use more? Absolutely. We've actually, and to the specific point, that since that influx has happened, we've hired an additional staff member.
Correct.
And the money we're getting from the government does not pay for that. It doesn't. I mean, it helps a little bit, but it's not enough to pay for an extra staff person to meet the needs of our EL students.
So to recap that, in the 6 years you've been here, that federal funding has come to us has stayed relatively flat, but our costs continue to increase, not only in just everyday costs, substitutes, salaries, benefits, things of that nature, but even cost of professional development. To send somebody to professional development doesn't cost the same today as it did 6 years ago.
Correct.
But our funding stayed flat. Sometimes that's what people would refer to as unfunded mandates. But even in the EL situation, we've had, and again, this is ballpark numbers, and I'm just speaking loosely here. We went from like 30 EL students to over 100 in the course of a year and a half. And to service those children, which they deserve to be serviced, they show up on our doorstep and we educate them because we're public educators in a public school system. We had to hire additional staff. And that staffing level probably isn't appropriate, probably isn't enough, but at the same time, our funds are limited. We can only do so much. But even in the planning aspect, we've received those funds 6 years, thankful to get them, even though they've been flat. We began planning activities, professional development, and things of that nature. And then when they held them, we were in limbo. I think it was even like, hey, Craig, where are we going to come up with $100,000 for the things we planned for this year? And being the treasurer, being black and white, well, just don't have it. Don't do it, right?
It's nowhere to be found.
And I'm thinking, how can we tell staff members who we said we need to get you trained in the science of reading and our math curriculum, our school counselors going to a conference that haven't been able to go to conferences in the past, things that are very valuable to the educators who work with our children, all of a sudden we don't have the funds to do it. And it's not that you're being the bad guy saying we don't have it. We just flat out didn't have it. We didn't know if we were going to get it. So, we have to be able to be pretty nimble as a district. But that makes our job very difficult.
It does.
And then sometimes some of our people, our employees think, well, they just don't want to pay for it, or they don't want to send us there, or they don't want to do that. No, we don't have the money. And ultimately, we have to balance the budget.
That is definitely true. All of it.
All of it is true. All of it is true. So I guess we hear a lot of stuff in the news right now, and we know that community members, especially community members on a fixed income, our senior citizens and things, are very upset about property taxes. And they don't want to continue to get property tax increases. But that's also the only way that a school district is funded. So why are we in the situation that we're in, do you think?
Well, I guess I would say that I think it's because of our legislators that we have.
All right.
I'm just going to put that out there because I'm tired of school districts being painted as the villains.
Right.
Because, you've got a legislator who's come out and said that school districts should diversify their revenue sources.
How do we diversify?
There are two ways that school districts can get money.
Okay.
One of which is property taxes, and the other is a school district income tax. Which historically fail at large magnitudes throughout the state of Ohio.
So you're saying instead of taxing people on the property that they own, or in the process of owning, we're now going to tax their income.
Yes.
And is that when they talk about earned income, or is it any income?
Well, that's a good question. It would depend on how that would be available, I guess. I don't.
So you're saying those are the two ways we can diversify as a district.
Those are the two ways you can diversify as a district. I mean, we already have other things that it's such a small portion of it. But we have, we do interest, we do investments, all of which, they have to be safe ways to get that revenue source from investments and interest. And then we have pay to participate in our community because, again, that's a cost. So that's almost $275,000 that comes in for pay to participate fees. So we're doing all of those things. If that stuff goes away, you're out on the ballot more frequently, or you're doing a school district income tax, or a school district income tax on top of a school district income tax, I guess, is what you're left with in order to balance the budget. Meanwhile, the state is funding education at the lowest levels in its history. It's going to be 38% this year, 32% next year, and it just can. Where's it going to stop? I guess
that's not a pretty picture you're painting there.
No,
Mr.
it's
Yaniglos.
really not.
So it's to continue to decline. So where is school district's going to make up that gap?
Right.
Well, we just heard there's two ways: property tax, income tax. Both of which are ballot initiatives that have to be approved by our communities. So that's going to be tough, right?
It is going to be tough. I think that, there's other ways to do that. They could have fully funded the fair school funding formula.
Mm-hmm.
That would have given property tax owners relief because the way those levers work,
Okay.
because they're using old, outdated inputs. So they're
Yep.
using teacher salaries from several years ago, and that's not accurate picture. When it changes the local shares or the local capacity, the state would have to pick up a larger portion of the bill.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as the 20 mil floor.
Yep.
The state could say we're going to lower the 20 mil floor to 15.
Uh-huh.
If they pass legislation to do that,
Yep.
it could solve a lot of problems for property tax owners and give them relief. But then who has to foot the bill? The state does.
The state does.
And they don't want to do that.
They say it's unsustainable, don't they? Isn't that a quote in the newspaper? In the news we heard a lot was the way that school districts spend money is unsustainable.
It's unsustainable.
I think the speaker was referring to the Fair School Funding Plan, right? It was
Correct.
unsustainable.
Unsustainable.
But I guess what is sustainable is upwards of $1.5 billion going to charter schools and vouchers.
That is correct.
So
With zero accountability, by the way.
right, they don't have to do any of the cell phone stuff that we have to do. They don't have to do any of the testing that we have to do. And then we could, and if you want to tune into our last board meeting where we talked about transportation, because that's kind of like just a little hidden gem of costs for our school district and things that happen to our students because we are forced to transport students who go to a school of choice, a private school or charter school that we have to transport. And that's probably a topic in its own, transportation, down the road for a later episode. But yeah, I guess it's sustainable to put $1.5 million into vouchers and school choice, where that same dollar amount would have covered full implementation of the Fair School Funding Plan, I believe.
I think it's almost probably close to the exact amount that would have
Yes.
fully funded the fair school funding plan.
And yes, we are biased, right? We're public school educators. We work in a public school, so I will fully admit to my bias. But the state constitution clearly says it, that it's the state responsibility to provide an education.
Well, and I've said it before. I said it to one of our legislators. I said, I think you solved the problem by just making them stand up for the same accountability features that public schools do. They need to have their books annually audited. Why are people not demanding that $1.5 billion is transparent and open to the public? We don't know what they're doing with that money. We've seen that they've raised tuition. We've seen that they've forced people to apply whether they want to or not.
I had a family, matter of fact, I had a family from Brexville Broadview Heights who sends their son or daughter to a school of choice, I'll refer to that as. And I just asked them, I'm friends with them, I said, well, do you get the voucher? And they said it's a requirement for enrollment that they had to apply for the voucher because they had been sending their children to a school of choice for years. That was their choice, and for religious purposes or whatnot. And they weren't allowed to continue enrollment or apply without applying for the voucher. And that's 1.5 billion, right? Not million.
Billion.
Billion. And $1.5 billion, it comes from where? Where do they get that money?
It's taxpayer dollars.
Taxpayer dollars. That the 50 to 70 million we get as a school district gets audited every single year. We're only allowed to spend it on certain things, and there seems to be a lot of accountability to us, which there should be accountability and transparency to that. So I think that's when I boil it down, because Brexville Broadview Heights is different. You've heard me say that about the school district. This is not normal here. And what I mean by that is we achieve at a very high level. We have great students, great families, and great community support, and we'll continue to do that. So I'm not fearful of choice. And none of my comments are there shouldn't be choice, because I'm a former economics teacher. I know the theory behind choice and the market. But the point being is that it isn't quite level.
Right, the playing field is different.
The playing field's a little bit different, and I'm sure it's tilted in our fashion in certain ways, so I want to acknowledge that. But at the same time, all of the things that are tucked into House Bill 96 that aren't really about a budget, but other requirements that we have to do, none of my friends at some of those schools of choice have to follow any of that. They don't have to do any of that. And that's what gets a little bit frustrating, is we have to meet these other demands and use certain curriculum and teach certain things that those schools don't have to. So I guess I'll stop on that, because, again, we could continue on that for a long time, and we're leaving out a lot of context in some of this conversation. So I don't want to mislead anyone with that. But I guess in the end, we hear our taxpayers, we hear our property owners, we understand that they don't want to see their property taxes increase. But what we want people to understand is that is the only way a school district can raise revenue. So if we want to continue offering the same level of services that we have traditionally in this district and historically, we have to go back to the ballot sooner or later. And we've talked a lot about levies, operating levies. We didn't even talk about bond issues, which is what you use to finance and pay for the building of new structures or a campus master plan, things of that nature. So we're talking about just operating funds here. So we hear our community. We want to be held accountable. We want to be transparent. And when we do ask for additional funds, we want our community to know that they can trust that we truly need those funds to continue the level of education we have here at Brecksville-Broadview Heights. Would you agree there?
I would totally agree. I think that, we have done, and this is a team effort. We've done an amazing job here over the last several years through record inflation, inflation that has really turned into stagflation currently. We've done an amazing job here with keeping our budget in as good of alignment as we could and as balanced as we could. Now, last year we saw that we started that deficit spend. It's a part of the levy cycle, but there were schools that through the COVID pandemic just didn't manage their funds as well, maybe, I guess. But at the same time, I think we've done a really good job. We consolidated buildings. We did what was necessary to hopefully continue to earn the trust of our taxpayers, because we do hear them and we do understand some of the challenges that they have. What we're asking for is that same scrutiny and transparency from us, is that you demand that from your state legislators who are in charge of such a large budget themselves, is to start demanding the answers from them, because they are another big part of the problem that needs to be addressed when you look at the fact that Ohio has continually been funding schools at an unconstitutional level since the early 2000s.
Yep. And I think the figure we heard was property taxes in the state of Ohio generate $22 billion.
Yes.
So for some of the chatter that's going on in our communities about the elimination of property tax, don't get me wrong. I mean, anyone who owns or is in the process of owning property, and you say, we're going to eliminate property tax, woo, great.
Sounds good.
But where do we come up with $22 billion?
Well, I can actually tell you that.
Oh, yeah?
Because
where would it come up from? Where would we get it from?
At least a solution.
Okay.
Again, at the workshop I went to last week, we had a leading economist come in and talk about this, and the state of Ohio would need to look at a 15 to 20% sales tax to make up that gap. So everything you buy would be 15 to 20% higher than what it is. You can have your property and you wouldn't have property tax, but again, it's the ramifications of all of this. People really need to think about if this picks up steam, because it is picking up steam, and we are hearing that, not this year, but in 26, there's still the possibility that that's going to get on the ballot to eliminate property taxes, and there is no plan B.
Right.
So I guess I would just also urge voters, as our due diligence too, is to say, if you're going to vote for that, make sure that there's a plan B in place, because this isn't just school districts. This is police, this is fire, this is roads, this is all those other services that you have that would no longer apply. And so if they're not proposing a plan B, I don't think that that's a really responsible.
What would that do to inflation?
I don't know. A lot, probably, right?
Absolutely.
The economics behind that is not going to be good, because everyone's going to be paying a lot more for things that they consume every day.
Every single day.
Every day.
So I'm gonna rewind just a little bit, and you talked about how the district has done a good job over the years of keeping the balanced budget and so on and so forth. And I want to just reiterate, that's a team effort. That's not a Craig thing, Jeff thing, or Board of Education thing. That is every employee in the district, every community member. And it also relates to when people talk about class size. Well, I really wish class size was smaller. I wish it wasn't 25 at fourth grade. Well, yeah, as an educator, sure, I would like to have 20 in my fourth grade classroom, but that increases expenditures.
Correct.
And so we're trying to balance. We're trying to have reasonable class size. We're doing pay to participate, not because we want to just charge the people who support us every single day, but because it helps cover a cost, upwards of $250,000 that pay to participate helps fund our district. So when we talk about being fiscally responsible as a school district and sticking to our budget, it requires things like pay to participate, class fees, maybe a little higher class size than some people may like. But if we wanted to lower class size across the board, we actually would have to go out for a levy just to cover the costs incurred by lowering class size. So I think it comes back to when our community is looking at Jeff and Craig, because we're the ones on the soapbox telling these stories, we're not choosing to do some of these things because that's what we think is best. Sometimes it's within our budget. We're trying to live within our means,
Right.
and not overspend and be frivolous with that. So
No,
it's a
and
tough balance.
It is. And as a treasurer, we're always trying to also create contingencies for things.
Yeah.
Because that can be a challenge in itself. I mean, over the course of a summer, they made some rule changes. For instance, this was, I think, 2 years ago with the preschool in terms of how many teachers, what kind of educators, what types of different classrooms. So in our peer model class, we have some classes that are fully special education, and we have some that are 50-50. We've got different mixes.
Yep.
And they've increased, for instance, I think we had to add 2 teachers to that circuit of preschool. And that is a huge expense for us, right? And it's not that we don't do that, but do we get funding for it? No. So that goes back to unfunded mandates, and that the same thing of managing our finances is that we're always, at least I'm always trying to make sure that there's still money available if needed, that you're trying to still kind of protect and know where all the funds are in case something like that happens, because sometimes things happen quickly or changes happen just in rules from DEW or different offices, government offices in the state that can really impact your staffing levels, because right now that's where we hold our budget.
And none of this covers if the boiler goes down or the air conditioning goes out or the roof begins to leak or, repaving parking lots. And I know I'm jumping between general fund and permanent improvement. I know I'm blurring the line there. But the point being is, just like in your household income or household expenditures, you have your fixed costs, but then you have things that happen. School districts have things that just happen. Unfortunately, we have to prepare for that. So
Well, and I think though that the community here has been supportive with the permanent improvement levy.
Right.
Not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but they've supported the permanent improvement levy, which does help protect the other dollars that we have specifically for the general fund, and we do use those resources appropriately that help us extend out our other levy cycles.
Right. And how do you explain to community members and say, well, look at it. I run a business in the school district spending over 80% on salaries and benefits. How, as a school district treasurer, how do you explain that to somebody in a public school system when their salaries and benefits are over 80%?
It's what we do.
It's what we do. We're a people business. It's not widgets. We don't get to post widgets across the stage. It requires people.
Correct.
And so, we're just trying to do what's best. Well, we've only barely touched the surface on the whole school funding conversation. And I think if we could, in 30 to 40 minutes, make this understandable to everybody, you and I can go on the circuit, and maybe we wouldn't have to be a superintendent treasurer.
Well, that's quite an interesting leap of faith.
Yeah,
but maybe
right?
we can do that. I don't
Maybe.
know.
I don't think so, though. But my point in that is if our community members, those who are tuning in the podcast, want to hear more about school funding and school finance, our first coffee chat of the year is coming up in September. It's the Thursday after our September board meeting.
I think it's September 17th.
Correct. And I should have prepared a little bit better, but it will either be Panera or the Coffee Club in Broadview Heights. And the topic, this year we're going to have a topic to each one of those just to keep us on pace, is going to be school finance. So we invite interested community members to come out and join us. We do this every Thursday after every Wednesday board meeting of each month. It's an opportunity to get to know Craig and Jeff a little bit deeper, and there's really not an agenda. We just want to answer questions and be accessible to our community. So with that, I don't know about you, Craig, but we're back in session full go right now. The decimal level around the district has increased. We opened up the football season with a win last week. Kids are coming every single day, so it's nice to have people around the district again.
It's great. The purchases are flowing.
All planned purchases by that.
They're all planned purchases with purchase orders.
That's right. That's right. So, well, thanks again, Craig. I appreciate your time and sitting next to me and trying to communicate these things to our community. And we'll have to see what's on topic for our next episode. We make it to episode 3.
I know. I don't know how often we're going to do this. I get asked this a lot. They say, how often are you going to do this? And I said, I don't know, but if this takes off, I think and the feedback has been good. So I think that we might be doing this more than we originally thought.
And maybe if we get better and better, then our team behind the scenes won't have to do as much editing, and maybe we turn them quicker, and then we do them more often.
Maybe.
Who knows?
What do you mean editing? This is all just, this is not
right.
Not
No.
happening.
Yeah, correct. No, there's the magic of technology that helps us out from time to time. So with that, I think next month, though, we should probably think about bringing a guest. We don't want people to just get bored with Craig and Jeff's show.
That's impossible.
And maybe we could invite a guest in to share a little bit deeper insight into our school district.
I think it's impossible for them to get tired of us.
Awesome. I did
But
hear, too, that
we could do that.
one of the feedback things is like, does your treasurer not like children? I think last episode when we talked about vacationing and cruising and no children, I think they took you a little too literal.
I mean, maybe. I mean, doesn't every parent want to go on vacation though without their children, or at least most of them? Maybe. I don't know
about that, Craig.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I was a coach for many years. I mean, sometimes it is really rewarding to work with kids, and that's obviously why I do this.
And I know you like kids. So, well, thanks. Appreciate it.